Hello, folks. First off, I just want to say I'm genuinely super excited to be here. We are combining two of my favorite things, CTI and the city of Berlin. Sorry, Paris, sorry, London. But I'm not here to talk to you about my love for the city of Berlin. We're going to talk about CTI, and specifically how to collect priority intelligence requirements whilst on a budget. For some context on who I am, I've had my whole career in private sector threat intelligence. I started out on the consumer side of things, mostly working for Canadian banks and tech companies. I then pivoted over more recently to the vendor side of things, where I work for an American AI company called Feedly. Now, I often get asked about the transition to the so-called dark side of intelligence. And the way that I describe it is it's like going from being hyper-aware of the problems of one CTI team to being generally aware of the problems of dozens and dozens of different CTI teams. And let me tell you, we have problems, such as my clicker. There's a core problem I've noticed recently uniting the vast majority of teams in this room. And it is this. We are under mounting pressure to do more with less. Less time, less budget, and less headcount. So what's the solution? It's the superhero PIR to the rescue, of course. Priority intelligence requirements have been touted as this solution to make CTI teams more efficient, our products better, and save us from the pressures that we face. But what if that superhero was super expensive to use? And what if they charged you every time they came to rescue you? Would you use that superhero? For those of us who are slightly newer to PIRs, they are a prioritized set of topics that your stakeholders need intelligence on in order to make better decisions. They're often posed as questions. So, for example, what are the latest TTPs to impact the healthcare sector by ransomware actors? And there's a lot of talks out there that focus on what PIRs are, why they're so fantastic, and the different theoretical frameworks surrounding them. But what I notice is lacking are some really granular, detailed talks on the how. How do you actually start to use PIRs? What do the first 90 days look like? And what granular steps do you need to take to go from not using them to it being implemented in your program? So that's the focus today for the next 30 minutes. But there's a challenge. We are going to attempt to do this whilst facing the very realistic condition that we have a minimal budget, both in terms of time and money, or money and time. To begin with, I want to give you an overview. This will structure the first 90 days of what collecting PIRs could look like, and it also structures the talk that we're about to go through. Day 1 to 30 is all about setting up the PIR collection project. Day 31 to 60 is about running through the PIR collection process with a single stakeholder. And then day 61 to 90 is where we iterate and repeat on the PIR collection process. So let's dive into it. Day 1 to 30, project setup. When you look at the literature on PIRs, there's a range of different approaches highlighted that you can take to collecting them. The approach I like and really strongly recommend is making stakeholder interviews central to the PIR collection process. By stakeholder interviews, I mean going to talk to the people that you send intelligence to, asking them what kind of intel they want, what their concerns are, and what's important to them. You might be sat there thinking, well, why? Why take stakeholder interviews over other approaches? What makes them so fantastic? And this is an entire conference talk in itself that I'll probably do one day. But for now, I'll give you my top 3 reasons. The first one is this. By talking to our stakeholders, we get to tap into their experience, expertise, and domain knowledge. They are experts in their part of the business, And unless you are willing to invest a considerable amount of time and resources, you will not learn that business line better than your stakeholder does. So just shortcut that. Go and talk to them. And more importantly, by talking to their stakeholder, you get to tap into their network. They can connect you to more people than you currently already know. Secondly, by doing stakeholder interviews, you turn the PIR collection process into a relationship-building mechanism. By going out there and talking to your stakeholders, asking them what their concerns are, listening to them, and acting on what they tell you, you're going to build up trust. You're going to build up a better relationship. You're going to turn more advocates for your CTI program across your business, and there will also be increased demand for your intel services. And if we think about the problems we're facing, where we're losing headcount, resources, so on and so forth, having more champions advocating for you across the business will be a big help. And thirdly, let's just be humble. We don't know what we don't know. We may think we've done the most thorough threat assessment. We have mapped every potential threat actor and initial access point, but we could be missing a lot of shadow IT. By talking to a range of people about the organization, crown jewel assets, you're going to really plug some gaps in your knowledge. So stakeholder interviews are fantastic, but they do take time. And how much time is really important to understand. So my next recommendation is develop a system that helps you track that time. This will position you for success when it comes to strategically planning out your PIR project. This is a brand new project, and we are adding it to your plate along with all of your other competing priorities. So learning how long it takes to actually collect PIRs from a single stakeholder will enable you to plan out how many stakeholders you talk to in any given week, month, or quarter. Does this mean you need to go and buy some fancy new project management software? No. Take a second now and think about a tool you use every single day and you have free access to. What springs to mind? Our calendars. This is a screenshot from Google Calendar. This is one that I use. Teams looks very similar. We all have calendars freely available to us as part of our standard suite of tools. And what you can do is color code and block out the time that you spend working on the PIR collection process. And Google Calendar will automatically aggregate these time blocks and will give you what they call time insights. And I'm confident Microsoft does something very similar. And this is really interesting because you can see how long you spent on that purple project versus the blue project versus the orange project. And this just helps you aggregate and understand how long it takes to actually collect PIRs from a single stakeholder. You can even do this for the whole project setup. That's why I recommend it early on in the process. Because when it comes to calculating your return on investment, you need to understand how long things took, because that's how much it costs the business. Once we've set up the time system tracker, it's then time to go and win leadership's approval for this project. Going and talking to your CSO or CISO and gaining their approval and backing for this project gives your project far more weight. It also means they won't be surprised when they hear about the CTI team running around the business, talking to all sorts of different teams and collecting their intel requirements. Most importantly, though, it's going to brief your leadership on the PIR collection project. This is going to be super useful for when you go and talk to them and ask them for their PIRs. But what's the quickest way to do this? In my experience, presenting a single slide with a business case is the way forward. Something that looks like this. But in case you're squinting, trying to read the font, I've purposely left it small. This is a business case for ants. What I wanted to do is not focus on the case for PIRs during this talk, but to focus on the how you can actually go and collect them. This is a resource that I'll make available in the slides. It's a template business case that you can go and take away and help you quickly achieve this step. So this is a resource that we won't focus on now, but it's there freely available for you to use. Once we have leadership's approval, the next step is to go and research your organization. This is absolutely crucial because, as a famous person once said, if you understand your business, you'll understand your stakeholders. I'm trying to work out the range for this thing, and there we go. But some of us work for very large organizations, and this can be an overwhelming task. There are 3 questions that I like to answer as a way to make this process simple. Researching your organization can be boiled down to 3 questions. How does your organization make money? How many of us in this room actually know how the companies we work for generate revenue? Keep in mind that that revenue pays for our salaries. Researching this will tell you a lot about your organization. Who makes that money, and where do they make it? What are the revenue generation centers in your organization, and where do they operate? Which geographies, which markets, which sectors? And thirdly, what do they need? What do the people who make that money need to make that money? What are the crown jewel assets, the things, the apps and the software that your revenue generation centers depend upon? Is it some advanced stock analysis software, or is it a simple calculator? Doing this research will really make the next stage a lot easier, which is mapping your stakeholders. For this, I like to take the concentric circle approach. This is where we put in the center of the circle the stakeholders that you must collect PIRs from, those that you should collect PIRs from, and those that you could collect PIRs from. Now, who goes in the center? Who are the must stakeholders? It's those stakeholders that are already in your mission or mandate statement as stakeholders that will need your intel services. It's the stakeholders that you have worked out through looking at a stakeholder matrix are going to be the most valuable to you. Or it's the stakeholders that control the budget that pays for your team and your tools. So we're definitely going to put our senior leaders in there, both inside and outside of our information security departments. SOCs will typically be there, as will a vulnerability management team, incident response, so on and so forth. Once you've mapped your stakeholders, it's then time to map the PIR process in preparation for running through the PIR collection process with a single stakeholder. Mapping your process will ensure that you and your team are all on the same page. You know what's coming up next, and you know how to communicate that to your stakeholders. Quick way to do this is to take these slides, use them as a skeleton framework, and then just flesh out that with more documentation and more detail. Now, you may have noticed that I said in preparation for the run-through with a single stakeholder. I recommend taking this approach as opposed to doing this project in batches, where you interview 5 stakeholders and then go and process those interviews in these huge kind of segments. The reason for this is when you run through this process end-to-end with a single stakeholder, you'll be able to spot inefficiencies and course correct early on. The other reason is if you went and spoke to 5 different stakeholders in one batch, and you promised them fantastic intelligence products, and then it came to production, and you realized that you can't meet this production cadence, you don't have the capacity to actually give them the intel you agreed upon, that could cost you a lot of credibility. So taking it one stakeholder at a time and running through the whole process is a way to avoid that credibility risk. At this stage, you might be wondering, well, which stakeholder first? Do we go up to our most important stakeholder? I personally don't think so. I think it's far more valuable and far more useful to pick that stakeholder that you've got the best relationship with. And when I say best relationship, they should be this happy to work with you. It's that stakeholder that you've built up a lot of good karma with, that you've done lots of favors for, and that is very forgiving of any potential mistakes you make. Because when we're running through this process for the first time, it's going to be most prone to inefficiencies and mistakes. So you want a stakeholder who will be forgiving of those mistakes, and who is also just genuinely very happy to work with you, regardless of how many fingers you may have. That takes us up to day 31 to 60. This is where we run through that process end to end. The very first step is to actually go and book the interview with that stakeholder. This will typically be done via email, and it's a fairly simple email in which you just introduce them to the project, define the key aspects of PIRs, and state what you need for them or from them. A quick way to do this, there's an email scheduling template that I'll make available in the slides. This is one that I wrote in an article that Feedly published. You can go and take this, you can edit it, sprinkle on some social engineering, and you should be good to book that first interview. Now, when I say social engineering, I mean you need to influence and convince your stakeholder to give you their most precious resource, their time. So you need to position this in the right way, as a collaborative project that will ensure that they have better intelligence from you, so it's a mutually beneficial process. Now, once we book that interview, it's then time to do a lot of interview prep. For this, I always keep the 6 Ps in mind. I was told this when I was 20 years old, working as a team lead on a university campus bar, and it's stuck in my head ever since. Perfect planning prevents piss-poor performance. You need to go in there prepared to educate your stakeholder on what CTI is and is not, what's possible through the intelligence you provide them. And I think the easiest way to do this is to also bring some examples of Intel products and services you've produced for teams just like theirs, and show them how they can implement this CTI to help improve the decisions they make. I really like to get into the mindset of my stakeholder, and I research their mission and their mandate statements, try to understand their pain points and their pressures, and this just ensures that we have a more productive session during the actual interview. A big part of this is to go and tailor your questions. I always have a baseline set of template questions, and then I'll adjust them to the stakeholder that I'm talking to. For more technical teams, go more granular, give more detail, get more technical. For non-cyber teams, translate some of the cyber terms that we use every day. Don't patronize, but use less acronyms. Some questions I like include, what is your top concern related to cyber threats that could affect your team's operations? Don't ask for every threat. Make them think about what is most important to them and communicate that to you. What are the most critical assets your team needs to have protected? Again, going back to those crown jewel assets. And how would you ideally like to receive intelligence? Breaking news. Not everyone loves 25-page Intel reports. We do because we're nerds. Our stakeholders do not. Sometimes a simple Slack message will do, something quick and easy and efficient. To help you stay on that time budget, there are additional template questions out there. This link here will send you to some that I published in an article. And I'd be remiss if I did not mention Intel 471's fantastic intelligence workbook. This is a free resource they've made available to the community, and they have inside of it a survey that you can use during interview questions. During interviews with stakeholders. Once we have our questions, it's then time for the interview. And some top tips that I love include, go hands-free. Don't focus on trying to take furious notes. Instead, focus on the conversation, because you don't want to miss those opportunities to drill down deeper. Talk about the weather. I'm British, we love this. But spend the first 5 minutes not talking about the interview. Instead, ask the stakeholder how their day is, how their commute went. Just spend some time getting to know them and making them feel at ease. Build that rapport. Don't steal time. This is great for people like me who talk a lot, but if you hit towards the end of your interview and you've got 5 questions left, but you don't have that long, sorry, is that 5 minutes until the end? Or, oh, goodness. Okay, I've got to speed this up. Yeah, I know, right? At the end, I would like to show some post-interview gratitude, a quick email to say thanks for your time. Now let's talk about going hands-free. Think about the conferencing software we use all the time, Zoom, Meets, that kind of things. We can just hit record and bring your laptop into the session and then just focus on the conversation. I even found out that Word enables you to do this. So you can actually upload an audio to Word and have it transcribed. And developing that transcription is really important. So again, Zoom and Meets enables you to do this. But the biggest complaint I find with PIR collection is that the post-interview processing time takes a bit too long. So a quick way to speed this up is to have that transcript from the recording and then go and enter the data into a large language model as a quick way to process that data. And I know what you're thinking. Have I proposed entering sensitive data into a large language model to a room full of cybersecurity professionals? But hear me out. This is a screenshot from LM Studio, something you can download for free, and you can then download and use large language models on your Mac or PC, and you can use them locally with no connection to the internet. This helps us mitigate some of those concerns we have about data privacy and AI tools. And what we can then do is put the transcript into here, run prompts against it, and this will help us process that data more efficiently, group the raw transcript into buckets and themes, and turn those into questions. But what makes a good PIR question, I hear you ask? These questions should have a singular focus. They should actually be answerable with intelligence, specific in scope, time sensitive. So if your stakeholder says just data from the last quarter, put that into the question. And they should help support decision making. At this point, I then recommend documenting your PIRs in a simple spreadsheet. This one took me about 20 minutes to draw up, and I've just put the PIR questions, a column for the priority level, stakeholders, my collection plan, and Intel deliverables. The collection plan will tell you which Intel sources you'll go and use when answering the PIR question, and the Intel deliverable is what you and your stakeholder agreed upon as the actual product or service and cadence of the Intel that you'll send to them. The next step is then share these PIRs with your stakeholder, ensure you're both on the same page, and run any prototypes of your Intel deliverables past them to ensure you're both aligned. At this point, we are up to day 61 to 90. This is where we iterate and repeat on the PIR process we just went through. Step 1 is self-reflection, analyzing costs and improving your PIR collection process. Ask yourself those tough questions. What did you do well, badly, and okay? What took up the most time? And this is where our calendars and those time insights come back into play. How can we make this more efficient? Based on how long things took, how many stakeholders do you have the capacity to collect PIRs from in this particular month or quarter? And we can even start to ask some more advanced questions about ROI. I then recommend going back to your stakeholder and gathering some external feedback. Ask them how we can improve upon the process that we just went through and implement that feedback. You'll then be ready to run through this process with a VIP stakeholder. I'm talking your CSO or CISO, the one that gives you the heebie-jeebies when they walk into a room. That super intimidating stakeholder which has a bird's eye view of your organization and is fully aware of the strategic direction your company is taking. Their insights on PIRs will be very, very interesting. And at this point, we just expand through the circles. Go and talk to your next set of stakeholders and ask their opinions, both inside and outside of InfoSec, such as your red team, risk teams, compliance, and vendor management. And that's it, folks. That takes us up to day 90. Here are the 15 steps we just ran through as a quick recap. I won't read through them all because we are almost at time. And this is where I would normally pause for questions if I hadn't spoken too much. So instead, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email or shoot me a message on LinkedIn. Thank you all very much. I appreciate your time and attention.